Well, okay, and happy Thursday, everybody. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join us today. We have what I think is going to be a really great conversation with a couple of people that you are all familiar with. Looking at the list of attendees, I know that we have really great relationships with most of you, and so we appreciate your love and support. Today, I am really, really thankful for two individuals that are going to be helping me out with this conversation. First of all, we have Miss Debbie Fuller. Most of you are probably familiar with her. She has been in the interiors industry for a number of years, and if you have ever gone after your LEED certification, she was probably the young lady who helped you pass your test. And then, of course, we have Emily Strain, who is the Director of Workplace Strategy for Corgan, and really looking forward to their insights. What we're going to do is I'm going to actually turn this over to Emily, who's going to kind of give an overarching presentation, kind of what our stance is regarding workplace reentry, and then we're going to give some steps that you can take immediately, midterm, and long-term to help make sure that reentry is successful. So, Emily, thank you so much for joining us this morning. How are you?
I'm doing really good. Coming to you from my home office. So really ready to get back into the regular office. Let me just tell you that. I've got two little kiddos running around here. So we're going to try to get through this without any interruptions or snacks needed. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, Brian. Really happy to be here. So when we talk about bringing people back to the office, the conversation is really kind of in two parts. The first is about things that we can do to enable safety. So modifications with your space, technology solutions that can help. But the other one is about inspiring confidence. And I love this word confidence because confidence is contagious. So if you can get your employees to feel like the work environment is a safe place for them to be, then that confidence will grow and it will spread to others. So how do we do that? Definitely alignment between parties here. So between physical space, the company policies, technology, and communications. We cannot stress this enough. This is just a tried and true change management practice that we've been practicing for years, which is the employee experiences the technology and the environment and the communication seamlessly. And so let's make sure we have all the right people speaking to each other to create a cohesive strategy. Behavioral training is obviously really important. How we go back to an office space is going to be, it's going to look different than it looked before. And so we used to interact in certain ways, and those interactions, hopefully just on a temporary basis, are going to look a little bit different. So training people through things like saying things multiple times in multiple different ways, through thoughtful branding and graphics is very, very important. I don't know about you guys. I'm really tired of COVID signs yelling at me that there's COVID in the air. Yes, we're aware, unless you've been living under a rock, and then maybe not even then, you know that there's COVID out there. So what we're really a fan of is graphics and signage that takes more of a behavioral training approach. So things like giving people visual cues about how far 6 feet apart really is can be super helpful. And then things that just show people that they are welcome back in the space is really important. So doing all that with clear and consistent communication. So how do you return? And then what are the rules of engagement going to be? So I'm a big fan of what we call trailhead signage, which means as you walk into the space, there's a sign there that says, hey, these are kind of the ways that we're going to operate right now, especially if you are in an organization that does have visitors come in. And then what is your safety and mitigation plan? In all the conversations that we've been having with end users, with developers and building owners, one thing that we keep hearing consistently is that people want to know what the plan is before you move in. So maybe you have a neighborhood strategy where you're limiting where people can go. Maybe you have technology that allows you to do contact tracing. Just basically communicating that plan ahead of time can go really far. And then as people do come back, making sure that you're monitoring how they're feeling, approaching it with empathy, realizing that everybody's kind of at different stages of how comfortable they are. And you can do that through different surveys and analysis and technology. So when we talk about creating one team, we really feel like it's important to bring all of these different groups together to have one cohesive team for employee experience. So that would be from the physical space, facilities and the design team, from technology, companies like what Brian is doing here. So important to have those integrated. And then communications, obviously we want to tell people what the plan is in a thoughtful way. And it's not just the people we work with, but also the people outside of our organization who might be affected by it. And then what the company policy is going to be. HR is really driving a lot of the response to this. And so making sure that all of these parties are aligned to create a smooth transition is super critical. So there's a lot of information out there about what you can do. Debbie's going to go over some great space strategies. Brian's going to talk about some technologies. As we've been looking at all of these things, we think it's really important to take into consideration that we're going to go through multiple stages of reentry, and we really want to make sure that we're being responsible with clients' resources here, right? So what are things that are low impact versus high impact, high cost versus low cost? And really, these things might look different depending on where you are in your lease term, if you own your building, if you're a campus, or if you're a small company. And so making sure that you really understand, that we really understand who you are and what you need before we make recommendations is just super critical to being responsible during this time.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. I think the one thing that we can agree is that everything is changing, and we don't know how long it's changing for, but it is certainly changing. And Emily, I think that graphic that you just displayed has a lot of fantastic information. For everybody that's on the call, I want to let you know that we are recording this and we are going to be sending it out. So some of these graphics we understand have a lot of information on them, and we're certainly not going to read through them to you. So we will certainly make them available to you after this. If you have any questions, also please make sure that you put them in the question and answer box, and we will get to those at the end of the webinar. But so to Emily's point, the workplace is changing. For the last several years, I've been in this industry for 20 years. That's kind of hard to say, but I have been circling the greater commercial real estate industry for 10 years. And, in that time, the footprint has obviously been getting smaller. Panels have been getting shorter. We've been moving to these huddle rooms. There's a lot of information out there that discusses that, anything more than 8 people is no longer collaboration, it's a committee. And so we've been trying to have those small 10 by 10 or 12 by 12 huddle rooms where 4 to 6 people would go in. And what do we do with those spaces now? Things about, physical door handles, and then obviously a workplace utilization software that can help you track, trace, and measure what is going on from an employee perspective. So with the workplace changing, we know that technology is going to change as well. And we have a couple of infographics on here just to kind of present the point. But we know for a fact that we're going to be moving away from contact technology, where there's a big ask for more and more contactless experiences, or for us to keep the content on the device that we're carrying around on a regular basis anyway. We have to figure out a way to do wellness checks on our employees and figure out a way to do that in a respectful and a legal manner. So there are some tools out there from a technology perspective that can do heat scans and start actually count your respirations and your pulse at the same time, so it can start picking up precursors for someone that might be positive from a COVID perspective. I think that you're going to start seeing a lot more sensors coming into the workplace, letting people know as they ingress and egress a place, so we can count how many people are physically there. And most of those things are going to actually be tying into your wireless network. There are a couple of apps out there. Netrix is really blessed because we have a couple of different versions of these. Again, these apps all reside on your mobile device. But what they do is they kind of take the guesswork out of it, and it also takes some of the legal liability off of the owners of the businesses. So for instance, right now, the CDC and the World Health Organization is saying that we distance ourselves at a minimum of 6 feet. The World Health Organization is considering making a recommendation that if everyone in that environment is wearing a face covering, that we could actually reduce that to 3 feet. So how do you accommodate for that in a constantly changing environment? We have technologies where we can come in, Brian selects a desk, and when I do that, it's going to automatically, based on the distance that I have put in there, whether that's 6 feet, 12 feet, 18 feet, or 2 feet, it's going to put a ring around me, and it will take those workstations automatically out of commission. And the same can be true for private workspaces as well as collaborative environments. So if we have a collaboration area where we know that we want no more than 4 people, we can set that standard, and once more than 4 people get in there, we can actually start sending notifications to your telephone letting you know that there is a problem there. From a contract tracing perspective, and this is one that everybody is really concerned about, is how do you do that in an ethical way? Again, we can set a distance as long as the employees agree to have the app on their phone, or as long as it's part of your new policy to enforce that everybody have that on their phone. Then once we go ahead and pass each other in the hallway, if we get too close, it could actually send us a reminder saying, hey, 6 feet. So a lot of really great things are happening from a technology perspective. Also, everything that you are seeing right now, we have put together a data sheet for you guys. So at the end of this, we can send you links to all of these resource materials as well. So Debbie, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can talk about some of the day one changes that we can make.
Okay, hello everyone. As Brian and Emily just said, we are definitely in a changing atmosphere, and we honestly don't know what's going to happen from week to week. We're getting new information from the CDC, from the World Health Organization. Information is changing, and we're just going to have to continually be flexible and be able to adapt as we start hearing more information regarding this particular virus. So the first area that you're going to walk into is going to be a building lobby or the entry into your office space. You might be seeing a lot of these, especially in a large building lobby where Brian just mentioned you might have infrared thermal scanner. It could be somebody holding it. It could be a camera. Again, this is not to be invasive. It's more just to protect the employees and your staff so that somebody, if they are contagious, then they can actually possibly go work from home. These range in all price ranges, and some of the ones that are a little more self-sufficient or independent are going to be a little bit more expensive. But again, you're going to see these most likely in building lobbies or the entry into your office space. So the next item that we're going to look at is your actual physical environment. Most companies have gone to consist mostly of workstations or benching. Benching seems to be the more popular solution these days because it takes less square footage. We don't seem to have as many private offices as we used to, but people are going to want to feel like they are safe where they're working. So we want to eliminate the number of people within the office and within these desking situations. Providing mobile screens that could be dry erase marker boards, they could be just visual screens to help people feel a little safer in their environment. Right now we're in a state where we want our employees to feel comfortable as they're coming back. Now, is there a screen around every workstation? Possibly not, but again, allowing your employees that flexibility. The one area that's really critical is going to be the receptionist. Having a protective shield, whether it's glass or acrylic, is going to be important because she's going to be the first, or as I he or she will be the first person of contact. So make sure that that receptionist is safe and protected in that. The other item that we want to bring up is currently a lot of the screens on the market, especially the ones that are applied to the desktop, tend to be either a fabric or a PET surface. The PET is actually probably more advisable because it can be sprayed with a disinfectant and it's not going to discolor it. However, some of the panel fabrics, there are bleach cleanable panel fabrics, but not all of them can actually handle bleach. And products like Lysol or some of the hospital grade disinfectants that do contain bleach could damage the fabric potentially. And unless you're ordering something brand new and you can confirm that it's bleach cleanable, you might want to be a little careful about what you're using on those surfaces.
Hey, Debbie, I just wanted to jump in here too. One of the things that we've been talking about with screens is that so much of this is a little bit more psychological than it is actually protective. I heard this interesting, one of our healthcare colleagues at Corgan mentioned that, if you were to blow smoke at a screen, that it would kind of go up and over around the screen. And so can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on that, around, psychology of screens and why that might be beneficial to do or not to do?
I think right now the screens are totally psychological. They're not going to help with sound. They do help with visual, but some of these screens that are short, that are 12 inches, aren't going to do you any good. A screen's going to need to be 24 inches tall once you're sitting to even be effective. And ideally, like what Brian mentioned earlier, some of the studies are showing that if everyone is wearing a mask, then we can be 3 feet apart. The key is we don't want to be facing somebody in a benching situation. It's better to be back to back as opposed to facing each other. So some of this is psychological, but again, it's getting people back into the office and letting them feel comfortable with the space right now.
That's a really great point, Debbie. And yeah, we certainly want to say that all of our recommendations, everything that we are saying today, is in no way a replacement for PPE. Everyone needs to wear a face covering. Please, if not for yourself, for those that you love, that you work with and are in your family, please, please, please wear your PPE.
So the next important it is going to be PPE, is providing sanitation stations throughout the office. They have to be everywhere. They also, you probably need to consider providing masks and gloves for those who forget them at home. Now, not everybody's going to want to wear a glove because it's a little difficult to type on your keyboard, but the sanitation stations are going to be critical. They don't have to look horrible either. There are a plethora of new products on the market that are mobile or that actually can house these elements in a display or be a wall mount fixture. So looking at these as almost an accessory is probably going to become important. Now, one of the things that's really important to understand, and I'm talking about this from a sustainability standpoint, antimicrobial lotions and cleaners are really horrible for the environment. And one of the reasons is as they get into our water supply, they start to infect and kill marine and fish and any kind of animal that lives in our water. So, but unfortunately, because the potency of this virus, we don't really have an option right now. But ideally, washing with soap and water and doing what the CDC says, where you wash for 20 seconds, warm water or hot water with just regular soap, it doesn't even have to have an antimicrobial, is ideally the best way to fight this virus, and washing often. So again, providing cues in the space that actually encourage people to do that and not just resort to the sanitation stations is probably another strategy to consider.
And just to add this for all of my germaphobe friends that are on the call, the CDC has said that if you use these antimicrobial hand washes, Purell, whatever alcohol, and you put them on your hands, you are actually killing the virus, but the virus is staying with you. It's still on your hands. So always the number one thing to do is to actually wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds, because what you're doing is the soap is removing the contaminants from your skin and then washing it down the drain. So hand washing is important.
So the next big component is going to be signage and wayfinding. And I love what Emily said about this helps build confidence. And the signage does not have to be negative. It doesn't have to be glaring. It can be just a simple or a sort of a soft reminder to stay 6 feet apart, or to use that particular walkway as a one-way point of travel. Being able to put signage on the floor, decals that allow you to to if you're standing in a space or if you're queuing up to get into the break room. Again, the signage, there are some great new solutions out there that don't damage your floor surface, that can be used on your current carpet tiles, that can be used on your painted walls. There are these decals that are similar to what you might use on your car. So some of your kids have these athletic signage options. Well, there's some of the same technology is coming around for some of the signage, so it doesn't have to damage your current surface and can be changed as needed. You may decide that this particular entry location is not ideal and you want to relocate that. So again, it's to help with encouraging confidence and so that people feel safe. This is especially important in building lobbies, especially if you're in a high rise, any kind of retail store, restaurant, and any kind of educational facility. It's especially important to provide signage, especially when there's children involved. You know, as a parent, you have to, you're constantly reminding your children to buckle their seatbelt. Well, the same thing is with keeping distance. So signage is a huge component in this, the next phase of re-entering the office space.
That's very true. And for companies that have invested, and you know, again, we can see who's on the call. For those of you that have invested in large digital signage platforms or environments, please know that we can help you with that as well. There's a lot of content that has already been created, and we can throw this up on digital boards just as easily as we can on the floor. So some of this stuff can be digitized. Emily, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was also going to say, you know, one thing that we keep hearing is that 6 feet is not necessarily something that everyone really understands exactly how far apart that is. I mean, Debbie mentioned earlier teaching your kids. I had to draw 6 feet in the sidewalk chalk for my 5-year-old so that he understands what that looks like. So one of the big strategies that I'm personally a fan of is how can we use kind of subtle cues? I think signage is so critical for this temporary situation. But if you have a project that's in design or maybe in construction, let's take a look at things like floor patterns, wall graphics. How can we subtly remind people what 6 feet is? And I think that's where we have an opportunity as design professionals to get really creative in the solutions that we put forth that will look good later on down the road as well.
Emily, I think that's a great idea to incorporate that in the design, especially for the new spaces. I think there's other elements that can be incorporated, which we are going to really cover in this presentation, but finishing materials is going to be really important moving forward, so that we can have a very cleanable office space.
Absolutely. And, you know, we understand that a lot of these things are going to be temporary. Again, we don't know what temporary is going to look like, but we're not recommending that every organization go out there and spend $150,000, $300,000 for this type of signage when we know that we can do it more affordably.
Mm-hmm. So the next area that we're going to look at is how do we provide comfortable solutions for our employees. The whole idea of hot desking, free address is something that a lot of companies have gone toward. Now, that would be a situation where you actually don't have a dedicated desk, and maybe you have a rolling briefcase that you take and use your laptop on a daily basis, pack it up at the end of the day, and someone else uses that station later. All of this is this is all in transition. Some companies are going to continue that, some are not, but you have to decide what's the best for your company. One of the things that could be very something to consider is going to what's called a clean desk policy, removing those individual personal items that all of us love to collect, but making it so that the desk can be cleaned easily at the end of each day. We don't want to have items that can actually have the dust particles or whatever collect and be harbors for the virus. So the idea of having personal lockers or possibly mobile carts that have handles that you can roll around to the different locations might be an item that is considered. Mobile peds, most of them don't have handles where you can pull them. I love this one I'm showing here because It kind of reminds me of something called the puppy years ago. I don't know if that's on the marketing, but lockers can have, they can be accessed through your phone app. There are some great new technology with lockers that don't have to have a key and don't have to have a physical padlock on it. So some of these would be for someone's personal purse, maybe their briefcase, their coat. Again, relooking at the office in a little bit different perspective than we've done before. Something that, again, was part of that study that came out of the University of Arizona, but I've also seen it from other people. The average desktop has 400 times more bacteria than a toilet seat. Same thing with a desk phone and same thing with a keyboard, which is rather disgusting to think about, but it's something to remember. And sometimes when we remember things that have a visual cue, we are more likely to adhere to that clean desk policy.
You know, Debbie, I have been a huge proponent of the clean desk policy. And one of the things that we've heard our clients have concerns about is that that's how an organization or person within an organization shows their personality and who they are to their coworkers. And so I do think if you are going to replace or you are going to move towards a clean desk policy, making sure that you can still give that creative freedom to employees in a different way to show who they are, I think is really important. Because again, it's that idea of going back to an environment that you previously were allowed to do certain things and now you can't. How do we take that outlet and channel it into a different way is, I think, a great design problem to solve.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, I agree as well. You know, I think that one thing that we can agree, whether it be free desk or whatever, is that there has to be a clean desk policy of some kind enforced, whether you own that real estate and you're going back to it on a regular basis, or whether you get to choose the real estate that you're going to consume that day. The important part of this, from my perspective, is we understand that housekeeping is no longer going to be a once a week feature, right? You know, no longer are they just going to come in on Wednesday nights, empty everybody's trash, wipe down the desk that don't have any personal artifacts on them. Those people are going to be living with us. So again, using the same applications that I were describing earlier, you know, we could select those desks. We can send an SMS, a text message, or an email to a housekeeping person. That person would receive that content, and then they would be able to instantly go over and clean Debbie's desk for the day. And then once you leave, they would get another notification that you had left so that they could clean it in case someone wanted to use it the next day. So some really great ways that technology could be impactful from this perspective.
I actually love what Brian's company is doing with the whole digital phone apps. Having everything in one little phone is just amazing to me from a time-saving standpoint, from not having as much paper and to be able to get instant results. Again, I think that as we move more and more into that digital arena with the apps and digital maps that show where we can sit during the day or where we can meet, I think it's critical, and just love that those are actually becoming more prevalent in the marketplace. Okay, this is a big one, and I'm sure this is one that people are gonna not sure quite what to do. The idea of possibly removing some of your interior doors. Let's say a door to a supply closet that's accessed multiple times during the day, or possibly a door that goes into a copy room. Again, some of these, like a janitor's closet, those aren't accessed very often, so those doors can stay. But a door that's actually accessed often, and primarily the biggest one is going to be a bathroom or a restroom. Sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't, depending on the design of the space. Sometimes you have a view issue, but what you can do is add a hands-free piece of hardware, extremely inexpensive, but you can actually install that on the pull side of the door for it's either a foot use or a wrist use. And so people aren't actually constantly touching that door handle. We still have the restroom stalls, which do have the little locks on them. That's a little bit of a different animal. I haven't seen anything available to actually mitigate touching those yet. But some of your doors can be accessed through maybe a security badge or maybe just through a sensor. But again, looking at alternates for door hardware, since door hardware is a high touch area. Now, according to some of the infectious control or infectious disease information, there are some natural metals that tend to inhibit the growth of viruses. Copper, for example. The problem is it's really expensive. It's not available in a lot of options. And as designers, it doesn't really match what you're doing in the rest of the office because we're such visual people. Unfortunately, stainless steel, which is probably going to be our most common, does not have any of those natural properties. So we do need to take in consideration those doors and whether we can remove them temporarily or just provide an alternate type of hardware.
Or we can just have a 70s revival and I'll go back to brass, right? So really quickly, while we're on the bathrooms, I do have a question, Debbie, for both you and Emily. There is kind of some conflicting advice that is going on right now regarding restrooms. Should it be a one in, one out? Should you close every other stall? Should you tape off every other urinal? Kind of what are your thoughts from that? And then I would like to go ahead and speak how we can help from a technology perspective in the bathrooms.
Honestly, I hadn't thought about the every other stall, but that's probably not a bad idea. Because most restroom stalls are pretty tight. So and most urinals don't have a partition dividing them. Maybe it needs to be one person in a restroom at a time, depending on the size of the restroom. I think those do need to be monitored, especially in like a standard office environment. Emily, what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would love, Brian, to hear about your technology solution because I'm with Debbie. You know, it is a little bit of a tough thing to solve because one of the things I think that you want to balance here is maybe, you know, you don't want to go in with so many restrictions that it then inhibits people from actually living their lives. I heard a story the other day about a building locally that was limiting access to the elevator, and they had a line 60 people long of people trying to get up into the building, right? So we've got to try to figure out like what that right balance is, and it's a really tough problem to solve. I think what I would say from more of an overall holistic strategy would be just the amount of cleaning that would happen in the restroom. So what we're recommending is a neighborhood strategy for planning as people go back to work, which means a neighborhood would consist of restrooms, workstations, conference rooms, offices, and a break space. And only the people that are designated into that neighborhood would actually use that space. And so you're reducing, and then obviously within that neighborhood, you've got a reduced density as well. So the capacity that's using the restrooms is already kind of naturally reduced. So I don't know. I think it would maybe be a company preference if you were going to limit them or not. The problem temporarily might kind of solve itself if you don't have full capacity of the office. But Brian, I would love to hear what solutions you have from a technology standpoint.
Absolutely. So, you know, for us, whether it be a desk, a conference room, a collaboration area, or a restroom, they're all just resources, right? So the same would be true for booking a desk as booking the restroom. We can actually put a digital flag outside of the door that has a red or a green light to let you know if the restroom is available or not available. So to Emily's point, this whole queuing thing is really going to be a problem because that cuts into employee productivity, whether you're waiting for the elevator, whether you're waiting for the restroom, whether you're waiting on common areas for like coffee or whatever that is. So via the same application that you are booking your desk or a conference room, you would also be able to book the restroom and make that light go red so that people wouldn't be going up and standing in line and possibly getting within 6 feet of each other at that time as well.
I think also, Brian, one of the things I was reading was talking about removing the doors on the restroom partitions. And you know, that reminds me of going to a camping ground or a rest stop on the road, and it's not very comfortable to go in. There's no privacy, and I don't think that that's going to make your employees feel comfortable. But again, that may need to be a strategy that's considered in the future when designers and architects are actually designing restrooms moving forward, is coming up with a solution where we don't have doors, and you do have sensors that tell you that it's empty or that it's being used. So that definitely could be a design, something to tackle from a design standpoint. So in looking at the restrooms, any kind of building that is currently meeting, that's a newer building or has a LEED certification, you're going to start seeing a lot more technology and advanced items in those spaces, like for instance, sensored toilets and urinals, sensor activated faucets and soap dispensers, because those are just, they're helping conserve not only water, but electrical resources. If you have a space that doesn't incorporate these, this may be something that you consider down the road when you do an upgrade. One of the things that has been interesting is we've seen a lot of movement toward your hand dryers, especially in public spaces. They are now saying that in the interim, paper towels are probably a little bit safer, and possibly a touch-free unit where you just flash your hand in front of it and the paper towel dispenses. The air dryers, some of them actually can cool water within them. Some of them don't necessarily have HEPA filters, and they can actually cause any kind of virus spores in the air to spread. So in the interim, paper towels is probably a better solution. And then also trash cans without lids, or if they do have a trash can that has a foot control, again, some of those might be things to consider in your restrooms. The next thing is going to be for coffee bars and break rooms. These again are frequented often, and we also have the whole vending machine issue with sodas and so forth. But providing a touch-free ice dispenser as well as water bottle filler or cold water dispenser is going to be real important for your employees. You want to have items where they don't have to touch and they can actually access these items in a sanitary method. These are things that can be rented or purchased. They're not definitely inexpensive, but I think that they are something to consider as an important safety issue for you. These scoop ice dispensers are definitely something that probably needs to be disconnected. These are breeding grounds for all kinds of bacteria and mold growth. A lot of restaurants actually have banned them just because they're just not always sanitary, and sometimes the ice sits in there too long and isn't very fresh. So again, consider things that don't necessarily have to be touched. Now, the items that are an issue, you have your microwave, you have your refrigerators. Some of these manufacturers on the newer products are actually providing your newer handles that have an antimicrobial coating on the door handles. This is fairly recent. Not all manufacturers are doing that, so you have to research who actually offers that as an option. But they still have to be wiped down. It just means that the bacteria is not going to survive indefinitely on those particular stainless steel or plastic surfaces. Again, those are going to be considered high touch areas. And I don't know, I have not really seen any kind of coffee dispensers that are voice activated. I don't know about you, if you guys have seen anything like that, but a new idea for someone to come up.
Yeah, there are some coffee machines out there that are app controlled. So again, I can request a cup of coffee. All of that depends on how much money you're wanting to throw at it. But I certainly think that the break room is going to be an interesting area when everybody gets back.
And again, there may be whole policies just around a break room. People need to bring their lunches, sack lunches, and not put them in the refrigerator and not use microwaves. Again, that's a whole thing to discuss from a management standpoint. So the next area that we're going to talk about is going to be sanitation and cleaning. This is where we need to learn from the healthcare industry. They have had such great success with using UV light in hospital rooms to clean. They will position these mobile units, and since they have such a fast turnover of occupants, they will go in there and use the UV light to clean the room. Of course, it doesn't clean linens and stuff like that, towels, whatever, but it usually takes between 10 to 20 minutes per room for a typical patient room. For a conference room, it might take a little bit longer. But again, for those areas that you are using, you have multiple uses like a conference room on a daily basis, making sure that it's cleaned frequently and cleaned properly is going to be really important. Having a cleaning person on staff is definitely another option. But again, the mobile UV light is going to be something critical. The little hand wand is not as reliable. So investing in something that's that could be actually moved from room to room. Now, the other possibility, or the other option is you can actually integrate the UV light in a ceiling system, let's say for maybe a training room or something. From a technology standpoint, it's a little bit more expensive, and but it can be done for new construction applications. Several years ago, when I had to replace the ductwork in my attic, I learned that I had black mold up there, which absolutely sent me over the edge. And so when my new ductwork was put in, I added the UV light in the ductwork. And I have to tell you, it has made a huge difference with the air quality within my house. So it can be done. It's not that expensive to have done. But for an office environment, that's something to consider, is to use something that's mobile and can be moved from space to space.
Absolutely. And I will also say this, we have 4 of the major furniture manufacturers on the line with us today. So my challenge to you guys is to see who the first person that incorporates UV light into panels and workstations, because I think that that's probably the next thing coming.
Yeah. One thing also that I failed to mention earlier was in the conference rooms, depending on what kind of seating you have, not only eliminating half the seating, but also consider using some of the seating that has a hard back, not necessarily an upholstered back. Again, you want to eliminate your high touch areas that are soft and that can absorb any kind of virus. And like I said, not all your fabric is bleach cleanable, and some of the healthcare wipes that they use can just wreak havoc on some of your silicones and some of your vinyl. So if you had a hard surface chair back, and I don't want to mention names, but there's a lot of them out there that are really comfortable. Consider those in those conference rooms where you have multiple people going. The other thing is consider removing the arms on your chairs. The arm pads are going to be another high touch area. Cleaning may forget to clean those arms, but often your arms can be easily removed on a chair. Conference chairs maybe not quite so easily, but if you do have arms, make sure they're something that can be cleaned and wiped. Okay, and the last this last item that's really important, and something that you're going to have to get in your building manager or your building maintenance crew, is to make sure your air filters are being cleaned or being replaced on a regular basis. When you have a building that has achieved LEED certification or WELL, this is going to be standard and integrated into the buildings. They're going to be using thicker HEPA filters. They're going to be on a regular maintenance and cleaning schedule. But some of your older buildings may not be so diligent about replacing these. But replacing your air filters is going to be really important. Also, increasing the humidity within the space to 40 to 60% is going to help reduce the infection. A lot of this virus is traveling through the air, and it's traveling through your ventilation system. There's been some studies that talk about underfloor air, especially older systems. As the air is blowing up from the floor, it can spread a little bit easier than if it's rather than the air coming down from the ceiling. So again, these are things to consider. Maybe engaging an MEP engineer who is specialized in HVAC might be something to look at if you're going through any kind of renovation or new construction in the space.
Absolutely perfect. Debbie, thank you so much. That was all really fantastic information. So, the logical question is what do we do as real estate and technology professionals, and how do we respond appropriately? I personally think that this can be summarized in 3 words. One, breathe. We are all in the same place. We're all in this together. You obviously have a plethora of industry experts that are here to make sure that you are successful upon reentry. So please breathe. Make sure that you're reaching out to your resource. The second thing would be assess. You need to know where your employees are from a psychological perspective, and you also really need to have a really firm understanding of how you were using your space pre-COVID so that you can understand where it's not going to impact you to make changes post-COVID or post-pandemic or however you want to phrase that. And then to Emily's point in the very beginning, after you have this team collected, after you have the information that you need, take action, get your team together and go ahead and make sure that you're prioritizing the projects based on that communication and your employees' mental state. So changes in workplace technology, these are some of the things that we think are going to instantly be coming around the bend. So again, we personally feel that applications, workplace management applications are going to be a really, really huge key to successful workplace reentry, as well as having full-time housekeeping. We have been incredibly busy and we're blessed to be so, but for the last 90 days, we've been working with so many of our customers and end users and some of you guys that are on the phone on getting you so that you could work from home via cloud-based offerings. And then, require touch technology, obviously, to be sanitized before and after every use.
So now we're just going to run through really quickly some best practices for day one. Reduce your density. You might need to reconfigure, reorient, or eliminate workstations. Sometimes that's just removing the chairs. Consider hot desking or implementing the clean in, clean out desk policy. Reinforce visual cues through signage. Removing individual trash cans and replace them with centrally located trash cans with hands-free or open top units, so that, again, one less item that can breed contamination. The next one is to remove seating in a conference area or meeting spaces. Eliminate, if you have a 12-seat conference room, maybe make it 6. Remove common items such as arms. Consider plastic or hardback chairs. And then anything that can be wiped down. I think we're entering an era where things need to be able to be more cleanable, not so much soft seating as what we have been accustomed to in the past. And then provide your employees with a plethora of mobile screens or options so they do feel safe and can create their own environment. Implement signage, signage that is not frightening, and signage that's simple reminders. Again, preferably providing maps on a phone app that tells you which rooms are available, which are not, and then just, again, communication with your employees. So remove office retrofits, remove doors, if possible, remove providing special hardware that allows you to use maybe your foot to open a door, eliminate your scoop ice machines, and then again, putting all your lights on occupancy sensors. Some of this is code required, so it may already be done. Some of it may just be retrofits that have to start, that need to be implemented from the beginning. Again, we're trying to eliminate as many touch points as possible. Personal safety, again, provide those supplies for your employees. Sometime, I'm not sure that everybody can wash their face mask every day, especially if they only have one. Provide those temporary masks. Provide the heat scanner at the front, so people can be determined if they do have the virus. Invest in a mobile UV cleaning unit that can be set in a conference or training room that's accessed often. Implement a full-time cleaning staff, and again, just provide touch-free appliances, trash receptacles, and other items. And then long-term is going to be some of your plumbing retrofits. Touch-free soap dispensers, as well as faucets, urinals, and toilet flushes.
Thank you, Debbie. Again, all great tips. So a couple of my best practice tips obviously are going to revolve around technology and how technology can be supportive of this. But the number one thing is to really think about how your employees are going to be using technology moving forward and rewrite your real estate and workplace policies for that. You want to develop new guidelines for employees that are wanting to work from home. Obviously, it's going to be our job to attract and get our employees back in. So how do you do that? Find out how you're actually using your square footage, invest in an application that can help you with social distancing, tracking, and tracing. And then from my perspective, be flexible and remember that culture is going to be your number one friend. So a couple of next steps in the near term. Again, we think that an employee evaluation, finding out where your employees are, finding out how they feel is really crucially important. If you look at the left-hand side of my screen, one of the things that we're going to offer you today is a free employee evaluation for everybody that's on this call. And one of the infographics that come out of it is this one, and it will show you exactly what your employees are worried about. So you can see here, this is actually metrics. So we're showing you a little behind the scenes, but we did this with our own employees, and you can see that people were worried about their family health, the potential upcoming recession, isolation from friends and family, what work-life balance looked like, and things like that. From an 83 perspective, this is a tool that we have that will help you learn how you're currently using your space. This is done via either Outlook or Exchange, and it can either be a push or a pull of information. Again, we do have that beautiful word graphic that shows you what type of meetings are being scheduled, who's scheduling those meetings, what type of meetings they're having, how many people are invited, how many people show up, who's scheduling meetings every Monday for the rest of our lives, but only show up one time, so that we can find out how our real estate's really being used. From a midterm perspective, again, after you've assessed your employees and found out the historical utilization of space, I think then you're able to make some data-driven design choices. Again, we don't want you investing, hundreds of thousands of dollars in a space that you don't want long-term, and we don't know how long this is going to be. So, please use the resources that are available to you. At that point, you can reconfigure your office space, change some technology, remove doors, increase housekeeping, move to 100% hot desking or clean desking, make sure that there's no personal artifacts so that your housekeeping organization or staff are able to clean and sanitize those areas appropriately. Make sure that you're working on your corporate communication infrastructure so that everybody knows how to collaborate, and they're no longer relying on whiteboards or dry erase boards. Obviously, those are dirty. If you have Teams or Microsoft Whiteboard, those are collaborative and interactive tools where you only have to touch your own device, but everybody can collaborate at the same time. And then make sure that the employees who choose to work from home are set up for success. So make sure that they have the right work tools, the right technology, and obviously that we're addressing their ergonomic needs. And again, be flexible. Long term, really, this all goes down to the second bullet as far as I am concerned. You need to be able to track, trace, measure, and optimize, and that's always going to be the case when you're going through change management. So the use of technology will help you do that because it's a growing curve. We have that data. We will be able to aggregate that data and give you real-time and historical information. Leverage those surveys on a regular basis. Here I said 90 days, but I think that in the beginning you should probably do that every 30 days just to make sure that you're doing a really good pulse check. And then again, leverage the digital signage solutions that we have that so often just have rotating pictures or whatever, and make sure that that's positive messaging that's reinforcing social distancing. So a little bit more about our 83 offering. Again, this is something that we're going to offer to some people on the call, and I have a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. But what this does is it shows you what departments and employees are meeting the most often, how those spaces are being used, the duration of those meetings, room usage, what topics employees are meeting about, and how many people were involved. So At this point, we would like to open it up to questions, and then we're going to go over a couple of offerings that Netrix has for you guys just for attending the webinar today. Again, we're super appreciative of your time. Debbie, there's one question, and I'm going to assume that it's for you. When you were talking about doors, someone said, what about access doors that require security badges?
Well, I would say that security badges most likely are going to be the hands of just one person. So I would think that those would actually be fine. I wouldn't think that would be an issue. It's more about touching. And since a security badge would basically flash in front of something and you would be the only person holding it, I would think that that would be just fine.
Okay.
So you might be seeing more of that in the future and not so much manual pulling of doors and knobs, more electronically controlled entrance and exits.
Perfect. Perfect. And then someone asked, is there an employee evaluation that you can use? So these are the two things that we're offering for you for attending the webinar today. Again, I love each and every one of you. I am so grateful and appreciative for your support and your partnership, and for you taking time out of your day to spend with us. From an 83 perspective, we have a 30-day proof of concept at no charge for any of the participants that are on this webinar that have 25 meeting spaces or more. I can see on here that we have a lot of firms, so we would extend that to your customers as well. And then for the employee readiness survey, please reach out to me after this webinar, and this is free to all attendees of the webinar, regardless of how many employees you have back. And then we will kick off that process with you. So yes, those are the two offerings that we have from a Netrix perspective. One more question. If we could give everyone one advice for day one, what would that be?
Debbie, I'm going to say be flexible, be empathetic, and be patient.
Absolutely, Debbie. I couldn't agree with you more. Altruism suffers, and so if we look at this through the fact that everybody is coming to this space, and when I say this space, I mean life, with a whole different perspective and background, and obviously everybody needs to be treated individually. These employee readiness surveys, that would be my number one piece of advice. Emily, are you still with us?
I am. And, my advice would be very similar about meeting people where they're at. Obviously, empathy is a huge skill in business. And I think, employees are going to remember how they're treated in this time. And it might be one of those times where we're all just really grateful to have jobs. But in a few years, you're going to want to keep the good people that you have. So I think that's one of the things to remember, too, is that, people will remember. And then the other thing I would say, just to add a little bit of something different, is just about communication. Communicating what the plan is ahead of time goes so far to reducing people's anxiety. And so I would definitely say communication ahead of time and communicating all of the things that are invisible. If you are going to implement any of the great tips that were shared today, making sure employees know that you did that goes a long way.
That's right. Please know that Corgan is available to you guys. They are working tirelessly on all of this stuff. If you don't have Emily's contact information, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will certainly make introductions for you. If you would like to reach out to me, my contact information is on the screen, and that will come directly to me. So if you have any questions, just make sure that you put workplace reentry or something like that in the subject line so that we can make sure that that comes to me. And if you have any questions for Debbie, you can send those to the same email, info@netrixllc.com, and we'll make sure that she gets those and has the opportunity to respond to you. Yes, someone just said, can you provide your contact details for the employee readiness? If you send an email at the info@netrixllc.com, that will come to me, and I will go ahead and get that kicked off. For anybody that wants my personal email, that is bcolumbus, just like Christopher, @netrixllc.com, and you can always reach out to me directly as well. Guys, we really appreciate it. We are at the top of the hour. We don't want to keep you any longer than you have committed to. Thank you so much, and be safe.
Bye.
Thanks, Brian. Bye.
Bye-bye.